A sudden impact breaks through the calm surface. The water bursts apart. A spray of murky mud erupts. Two massive shapes twist into each other, like forces that cannot coexist. Above the river, all seems peaceful, but below the surface, there is war. From the endless Nile to the winding Luangwa. From the sun-scorched Mara grasslands to the flooded Okavango swamps. This is more than just a river. It is a border, a boundary between two worlds, where life begins and where it ends. Here, every creature must choose a role, to dominate or to be pushed aside. There is no permanent throne, no fixed order. Only the strong can briefly hold the right to decide who survives. One species hunts in silence, lurking beneath the muddy flow. Another commands the river's surface, with sheer weight and numbers. Crocodiles and hippos. No one is born a king, but the river will decide who remains. Flood season never arrives gently in the Luangwa. It comes swirling and fast. Water rises. It covers the lowlands along the river, dragging soil, grass, and the fading traces of the dry season. The old riverbanks disappear. The line between land and water dissolves. The entire Luangwa corridor, once a refuge for many species, becomes a wet maze, drenched in mud, filled with scattered flows. In this chaos, Nile crocodiles do not stay idle. They leave the dry sandbanks and spread out into smaller channels. Some individuals follow the flooded edges, where antelope herds often pass. Others climb to higher patches of land, preparing to nest for a long breeding season. At the points where shallow water meets exposed ground, nests begin to take shape. Female crocodiles dig into moist sand. They pile on layers of mud, forming raised mounds. They don't incubate like birds. They don't coil around the eggs like snakes. They choose to stay near, silent, just far enough to avoid drawing attention, but close enough to act when needed. Afternoon. Water now reaches the base of the riverside trees. The river has widened nearly double what it was a week ago. In the stillness, a round shadow moves slowly. A hippo, not a large pod, just a young female. Swimming alone down a newly formed channel. She may have been separated, or just driven out of an old home range. A common event for individuals that reach maturity but haven't gained a foothold. But whatever the reason, her path is a mistake. Ahead lies a zone where a crocodile had nested just hours earlier. A sand mound rises above the water. It appears harmless, but beneath the mud lie dozens of buried eggs, all around hidden in the murky flow. Adult crocodiles lie still. They do not move. They don't expose their backs. They watch. The classic hunting method of their kind. Patient and sudden. The hippo draws closer. She shows no signs of aggression. A nearby mother crocodile raises her head from the water, then lowers it again. She does not charge, just a quiet warning. Like a signal exchange between animals who are more used to avoiding conflict than starting one. But the hippo does not see it. She continues toward the bank, unaware that each step brushes dangerously close to another species' breeding ground. The line between survival instinct and provocation starts to blur, and then the first response. The clash happens in an instant. Two bodies twist in the mud. No blood, no fatal strike, but every shove, every lunge carries a clear warning. Back off, or continue being a threat. By morning, the waters seem calm again. Antelope drink at the opposite bank. Crocodiles return to bask in the sun. In the Luangwa, every flood rewrites the map. There are no fixed paths, no safe zone that lasts forever. The trail today may become another's nesting ground by tomorrow morning. And in that ecological blind spot, where the behavior of one species unintentionally crosses into the limits of another, conflict arises, not from territory, not from cruelty, but simply because neither side has enough room left to avoid the other. Crocodiles are not always the attackers. Hippos are not always the hunters, or the hunted. But in the shifting waters of the Luangwa, no species holds full control over the land it walks. The ground cracks open. There is no sound of flowing water, no frogs, not even birds. Only wind remains, carrying dust and heat rising off sun-scorched earth. Okavango is drying out. Each year, this delta is revived by floods from Angola. But now the once vibrant channels have turned into black sludge, or hardened, cracked mud. There is no trace of moving water, only animals retreating. Across the brittle terrain, the sun tilts westward. The herd's shadows stretch across the mottled land. Some begin to tire. There is no mud to cool them, no water to soak in. The skin on their backs, the part most exposed to sunlight, starts to peel. A young one slips on the soft ground. At the very rear, a large male walks slower than the rest. A scar runs along one side of his body, an old wound, dried but not fully healed. He once led. Now he follows. No longer choosing the path, but still moving with the group, at a safe distance. They slide into the mud, sink halfway in, then lie still. The water is shallow, just enough to cover their legs, but it's enough to lower their body temperature. A sound escapes, a burst of breath from animals that have just survived the journey. The mud sticks to their skin. It cools, shields them from the sun, and forms a temporary layer of protection. This is not ideal, but it's enough to hold on. The last male arrives. He doesn't rush into the water. He stops at the edge, breathing heavily. This is the phase of recovery, not a time for communication. Lake Tanganyika, a vast, deep, motionless surface, lying at the crossroads of East Africa's ecosystems, where rivers and mountains converge, forming a great basin that connects to the drinking grounds of antelope and buffalo. Morning. But in the shallows, where the reeds bend in the wind, a long shadow stays motionless, a Nile crocodile, old and patient. It lies near the shore, close to the dense footprints of antelope. No movement, no tail flick, no sound. It waits, not from hunger, but because it knows the moment will come, if it waits long enough. The crocodile does not lunge. It doesn't splash. It doesn't strike with force. It simply slides forward, just above the mud, beneath the cloudy water. From an underwater angle, The camera could catch the silt beginning to swirl. The calf's front leg sinks in, its head lowers slightly. A pull, no leap, no side snap, just a short, silent tug. From below, no frantic reaction. The calf loses balance, gets dragged slowly into the shallows, then disappears completely. This wasn't a dramatic strike. No high-speed chase, no chaos, just a perfectly timed pull. In silence, the Nile crocodile does not hunt for display. It doesn't need blood to prove dominance. All it needs is one small mistake from one vulnerable animal and a patch of water murky enough to hide the rest. That's how this species has survived for millions of years. Not because of speed, not because of intelligence, but because it disappears before it is ever seen. In the breeding season, female Nile crocodiles leave the main river. They scatter along smaller channels. They do not gather, they don't move in groups. Each one searches for a spot far enough to avoid others, but close enough to return to hunting grounds when needed. One large female with cracked, flaking scales along her back pushes through the reeds and climbs onto a raised patch of earth by the water's edge. There are no signs of other crocodiles nearby. The ground is a mix of sand and mud, soft enough to dig, firm enough to hold shape when the waters rise. She begins to dig. Each stroke is firm, precise. A shallow pit gradually deepens. There is no rush, no growl, only repetition. Every motion, every posture, as if written into her biology. Once the hole is deep enough, she lowers her body. Her belly touches the earth. She arches slightly, then goes still. The eggs begin to emerge. No blood, no sound, just the quiet arrival of life, one wave at a time. Crocodile eggs are oval-shaped, rough-textured, grayish ivory in color. She uses her feet to push sand back over the nest, then presses it down. Her head sweeps more earth on top, forming a small mound above the flat ground. Finally, she stays, close to the nest. She doesn't cover the eggs with her body. She just lies nearby, watching. It takes more than a month before the eggs begin to hatch. From beneath the soil, soft clicking sounds begin to rise. One egg at a time. The sound is faint but tuned perfectly to awaken instinct. The mother returns. At the right moment, she uses her snout and her feet to clear away the dirt. She greets the hatchlings as they emerge. Small, weak, but alive. Not all make it, only a portion, but enough to keep the cycle of survival going. Late afternoon on the Mara Plains. Sunlight filters through thin clouds, casting a soft glow across the slowly drying river. The current is gone. What remains are shallow pools scattered among rocks and pressed reeds. In one such pool, what looks like a drifting log holds eyes. Faded, sunken, still. An old Nile crocodile lies buried beneath a thin layer of mud. From the reed's edge, a herd of topy antelope approaches. They move cautiously, splitting into small groups, not too close together, not straying too deep. One group chooses the shallow side where the ground is firm. The crocodile remains still. It waits until the young neck dips near the surface and the front leg touches soft mud. There is no warning sound, no reaction from the herd. The water suddenly bursts open. Seconds later, the surface is calm again. No trace left. Only a stillness, thin and quiet as if nothing ever happened. Only the quiet patience of an old predator. One who understands the river and knows when the silence feels off. The older crocodiles no longer fight for territory, yet have the highest success rates. They waste no energy. They are never provoked. They choose the right place, the right time, and only strike when success is certain. Not every kill makes a scene. Not every predator needs to be seen. Some only need the right moment to rise, to strike, and vanish like a shadow in the water. Early morning on the Nile, the water lies still. Soft light seeps through a veil of mist. The air is silent. Near the edge, a few hippos rise from the riverbed and settle into a shallow pool. In this land, for thousands of years, the shape of a hippo has appeared on stone walls, on clay pots, and in carvings across ancient Egyptian temples. A round, heavy body, wide mouth, short legs, not a figure of elegance, but one that was everywhere in the daily lives of ancient people. On a branch of the Nile in South Sudan, a female hippo positions herself between her calves, and a lone male approaching, she roars, opens her jaws wide and charges. The push does not kill, but it is enough to drive the rival back. It is no coincidence that this scene mirrors the statues of Tauret, the protector goddess of women and children in ancient Egyptian belief. Protection expressed not in legend, but in real behavior. At the opposite end of the Nile in the Asyut region, footage from ecological monitoring stations shows a dominant male hippo occupies a narrow pool. He bellows at any creature that comes near. A stray calf is shoved violently from the shallow water. Not for food, not for mating, just to secure control of the territory. This cold behavior is why ancient cultures once linked the hippo with Set, the god of chaos and destruction. The same species, the same body, but two opposing instincts, one to protect, one to destroy, and that contrast was carved by human hands onto stone, clay, and the walls of tombs. In the heart of the dry season, the lower Zambezi has fractured into isolated pools. No more continuous flow, no longer a river that guides seasonal movement. In a sunken pocket of water caught between two dried-out river sections, a group of hippos is trying to stay alive. They have no choices left. The old escape routes have gone dry. What used to be damp reed forests is now dust and scorched trunks. The water is stagnant, foul-smelling muddy, but it's all that remains. And in that pool, hippos are not alone. Nile crocodiles are also trapped. There are no fish to hunt, no way back to the main river, and no longer enough distance between the two species. They're forced to share the same shrinking space, barely the size of a drain field. Hippos are animals of strict social order. They move in structured groups, follow familiar migration paths, and in years with abundant water, they find deep pools, carve trails through reeds, and avoid contact with predators. But this year, everything is different. There is no current to follow, no sandbar wide enough to keep away from danger. On a sweltering afternoon, the surface lies still. The hippos cling to the edges, bodies glazed with sticky mud, skin turning ashen from sun and stagnant heat. One calf walks to the edge, seeking cooler water. No one warns it. No one leads. Across the pool, a large crocodile begins to move. It is not out to attack, but natural behavior is now distorted. It hasn't eaten in days. The fish are gone. The water birds have moved on. It draws closer. The clash is quick. No long chase. No dramatic ambush like in flood seasons. Just one small movement, a twist below the surface. The calf is bitten across the side. A sharp cry rings out through air thick with heat. In a landscape without water, there is nowhere to retreat, no room for balance. Two species that once avoided each other now coexist in the same shrinking pool, not out of instinct, but out of necessity. When the river no longer connects, old survival strategies fall apart. An entire ecosystem, once sustained by a broad current, now exists in fragmented puddles, and tension builds daily. The change is not just natural. Upstream, the Zambezi is split by dam systems like Kariba and Kahorabasa. They regulate water for energy and agriculture, but disrupt the seasonal rhythm downstream. Instead of natural floods, there are now artificial water releases on human cycles. Wildlife cannot adapt fast enough. The crocodiles have lost their fish. The hippos have lost their paths. Storks, herons, and otters have disappeared one by one. A chain of collapse spreads across the food web. There are no clear predators now, no certain prey. A single bite on a calf doesn't come from malice, but from hunger. A counterattack is not for the kill, but to protect what remains. When nature is stretched to its limit, there is no boundary between predator and prey. Only creatures trying to hold on to the last threads of life in a world closing in. The question is no longer which species is stronger, but which species still has enough water to survive the longest. Dawn breaks over the southern reeds of the Okavango. The water glistens with a pink hue, rippling gently with the breeze. Bird wings flutter amidst the quiet lapping of water. In the soft mud, footprints of a prior traveler remain etched. Amid the intricate network of post-rain channels, slender streams weave through the reeds. They don't follow straight lines, nor do they adhere to the main flow. They meander, as if someone had charted the course beforehand. Depressions stretch across the plain, shallow troughs guiding water from one pool to another. At the center, a solitary hippo moves slowly toward the damp reeds. Each step carves a shallow path. With every crossing, water follows, threading through the grass, forming new currents. No deliberate construction. No intent. Just movement unwittingly crafting biological conduits across the delta. Nearby, an ecological research team marks two areas, one frequented by hippos, the other naturally isolated, untouched by large creatures. After 7 days, the contrast is stark. Where hippos tread, water continues to flow. Small fish follow. Floating plants trap plant debris. In doing so, it performs another task: defecation, not on a fixed schedule but consistently. Hippo dung is nutrient-rich, fostering environments for bacteria, plankton, and small fish. These organic fragments, though odorless to hippos, become a bountiful food source for myriad small aquatic organisms. Soon fish arrive. Otters follow. Waterfowl settle in. A biological chain forms centered around what might seem unclean. In an eastern marsh, a shallow stream winds through reeds, connecting pools. To observers, it appears a natural watercourse. An old, solitary hippo, seeking a quiet resting spot, had forged this new path. The next day, otters swim along it. A flock of wild ducks lands. No one witnessed the creator, only footprints remain, and water beginning to move. In another area absent of hippo traces for 3 seasons, water stagnates, murky and odorous. No fish, no shrimp. No animals linger beyond a few hours. An ecosystem fading, not due to a predator's arrival, but because a creature ceased to move. Meanwhile, in active waters, a hippo passes over a floating grass mat. Water fills the depression in its wake. Small fish follow the current. A flock of egrets descends. Wings flutter, fish splash. A life cycle renewed without a single ambush. No bloodshed, no pursuit, no heart-pounding chases like those of crocodiles. Yet irreplaceable. For if tomorrow hippos vanished from the Okavango, no one else would tread these paths. No one to maintain the water's flow, no one to deposit nutrient-rich waste, and albeit elephants or tiny shrimp would gradually disappear. No one labels hippos as architects. They don't build, don't control, don't coordinate. They simply exist as the river requires. A female hippo swims through a shallow pool. Behind her, water fills in, mud surfaces, and a school of young fish follows. No guidance, no command. Yet the world continues so long as they remain. The water keeps flowing. From rainforest headwaters to the floodplains at season's end, river branches meander like veins across the continent. Fish still swim. Birds still fly. Instinctual calls still echo each evening, but the keepers of this rhythm are dwindling, not due to nets, not due to rampant hunting, but because water no longer flows as it once did. And when the current changes, the entire rhythm of life shifts. Hippos' seemingly passive creatures are the engines that open pathways for water. Crocodiles, perceived as emotionless predators, serve as biological filters, balancing prey within the river. No rulers, no subordinates. Yet each individual prevents the ecosystem from collapsing. They aren't adversaries. They are opposing forces, both essential for balance. And the final question isn't who is stronger, but if one disappears, will the river remain the same? And if those rivers no longer mirror their past, will we still recognize ourselves in nature's reflection? Thank you for journeying with Wild Expeditions to the very end. If you believe nature deserves to be heard, please like, share, and subscribe to breathe life into the stories yet to come. From wild rivers to places where life continues to persevere each day. See you on the next adventure.